Hey friends, welcome back. So today I'm going to be trying out the IQON ACT skates, doing some aggressive skating. Alright, so let's talk about setup real quick. So I got the Entente Larifari frames, dead anti-rockers, somatic Brian Weiss wheels, the white IQON ACT skates. So this is the one that comes with the 90mm frame setup, and then I got the MyFit Prime liners, and then the cuff is in its standard position that it comes, which is basically at 6 o'clock. So let's get to it. Alright, so let me give you guys an update. So I've been skating the IQON ACT skates for about 4 months now in a big wheel setup, and I've been curious on how these skate for aggressive. I've wanted to get some sole plates. Pretty much everywhere has been sold out of them, but Oak City ended up having a pair, so I bought them, and it's kind of perfect timing because I've put another 6 sessions in on the Faction skates since my last video. And you know, my toe box is just continuing to be cramped where it's like making my toes sore after skating. But also I've started developing like a knee pain, and I can't tell if I irritated my knee just from skating or if it's just with that much heel lift, if you know, all that landing on my knee is just irritating it in a bad way. So it's kind of a perfect opportunity to just take a little break, try something different, because I really do want to try these aggressive, you know, as I'm working on my final review for them. All right, so it's kind of hard to see, but you know, I can put my whole finger in here between the top of the liner and the bottom of the shell. So definitely a little room in this skate. All right, so it's super noisy outside, so I just kind of wanted to do the recap from my car. So let's kind of talk about what the first session was like in these. So one thing that I thought was odd when setting these up is, for some reason, the white ones compared to the other versions only have 4 mounts basically drilled and set up in the skate, even though there's 8 holes. So if you buy like the gray version with the sole plates or the black version with the sole plates, it comes with all 8 holes with the mounts like already in the skate. So I thought that was kind of weird. Second thing that I thought was weird is the frame bolts that came with the sole plates. They were too short for the frames. And so I had to dig through all my skate parts to find a couple that actually worked in there. And, you know, it had me thinking, like, when these first came out, there were a bunch of people who like snapped the receivers within the sole plates, and it made me wonder if the frame bolts that come with the skates are too short so you don't get enough thread embedment into the receiver, and so it ends up shearing off the receiver. So anyway, I thought that was a little weird. You know, as far as flex on these go, you know, I've been riding them for 4 months, but honestly, to me, it doesn't feel like the plastic has changed at all. But, you know, I wanted to focus on skating just a ton of ledges today, because one of the things I heard is that these are really stiff and that it was hard to basically skate. But I really didn't have a problem, you know, with top sides. You know, it took me a couple times to try and figure out the positioning of like back farves and my back unities, but I think that has more to do with the shape of the backside plate, because it basically has this like hook. And so normally when I'm doing back farves and back unities, I'm like hanging out on this part of the sole plate. So if I've got this little lip and wing here, it just throws off my foot position a little bit. And so it takes me a few attempts just to really figure out like where I need to be with this frame setup. So I thought that was a little interesting. You know, fit on these feels really good for aggressive. You know, length, width feels really good. You know, I put the stock liner in them because I wanted to try that with aggressive. So if you haven't watched any of my videos with me skating these big wheel, I found that this liner was too thin and didn't really fill out the shell. And, you know, honestly, skating these aggressive just basically like confirmed that for me. So, you know, I think what I'm gonna do is pop these out, put the MyFits in, you know, for my second session. But I mean, like, you know, look at that. And I've got a video where, you know, I basically show you, it's kind of hard to tell, but, you know, the liner stops like a good ½ inch below the top of the shell. And I think it stops short horizontally too. So it just means there's going to be a little play in there. So something I'm going to just kind of play with. Let's see what else. You know, honestly, cuff in this position, didn't mind it. Shock absorber, I thought it was an okay shock absorber. I honestly don't think it's better for absorbing shock than like the heel pad that comes on the MyFit liners. And I think it's just the type of foam that they use with this. And, you know, honestly, because they have metal plates on the bottom of the skate, and then plus the fact that I'm paired up with this really hard, really dense frame, I did feel shocks and landings a little more than I usually do today. So, you know, maybe what I'll do is throw in different insole and see if that helps fill some of the space and then helps with some shock absorption before I swap out the liner. I don't know. I'm gonna think about it. We'll see what happens next. But what can I say? I mean, everything slid well. I was a little curious how the sole plates would slide, because they have this texture on it, and I couldn't tell if that would slow down the skate or make it faster, because I've noticed sometimes like when you get a lot of texture, you get a lot of like dimples and rivets. What it does is it collects wax, but then like if you've got a lot of like old wax, it gets like really gummy and it kind of tends to slow you down, versus something that's just kind of flat and smooth that you can just like scrape it off. But at the end of the day, it's probably just a preference thing, and depends on how hard you skate too. You know, mainly was able to get all my basic tricks in today. Didn't really want to overdo it just because I want to skate all weekend. But yeah, I think that does it for the first session, and I'll be back for session 2. Alright, so let's talk about a couple of the updates that I made to the skate since my first session. So first I want to point out that I was wrong about the insole shock absorber. So the shock absorber that comes in the skate is pretty much the same that's on the MyFit liners. It's the foam pad that sits above it that basically runs the entire length of the boot that's foam, that I feel is pretty soft and doesn't do a whole lot. I didn't make any changes there. I moved the cuff from the 6 o'clock position to the straight back 9 o'clock, and that's because when I went back and I was looking at some of my footage, it definitely looked like, you know, the skate was a little stiffer. I didn't feel like I had any problems with it, but I wanted to go ahead and just experiment with, you know, how does that feel, you know, pushing it back. because I felt in the down position gave me, you know, the perfect amount of stiffness for big wheel skating. And then, you know, when I skated aggressive yesterday, it felt pretty good. Next is I swapped out for the Intuition premium liner, and this seemed to fit the shell really nicely. So let's go ahead and see how it does skating today. And then what I did too is I had laces that basically went up to the eyelets, but I swapped them out for another pair of laces that I had that basically integrated the liner with the shell. So I'm gonna go ahead and see that. And then basically the frame and wheel combo, you know, is exactly the same. It's getting super dark. It's looking like it's gonna rain, so I'm kind of on borrowed time. So I'm just gonna hit a couple more things and try and wrap this up. All right, well, it started raining, so had to call it quits. Nothing worse than slipping out on smooth concrete when it's wet. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple things: fit, flex, and shock. I'll go ahead and talk about the shock. So yesterday, in yesterday's video, I mentioned that landings felt a little more harsh. And honestly, I think it's a combination of how hard and dense these sole plates are, combined with how hard and dense these frames are, and all of that just kind of collects it, and there's not a lot of shock absorption basically in the front foot of the skate. So, you know, I think that's where I'm feeling, you know, some of that shock transfer. So I don't know what I'm gonna do about that. I'm gonna think about that a little bit. Fit, you know, honestly, the length of these and the width of these is perfect, and I think the Intuition complements these very well. One thing that I noticed is the toe box feels a little flatter compared to some other skates. So that means when I'm landing, it feels like my toes are kind of lifting up and they're hitting the top of the toe box and just getting a little sore that way. So I'm gonna think about what I want to do about that. I may put in some like foam tape on the top just to kind of create like a little buffer. Again, I'll think about that, but overall, Intuition liners felt really good in here. I was getting just a little bit of heel lift, so I think what I'm gonna do is go back to the shorter laces just within the skate, use the Intuition laces and lace up the liner, and basically just use a dual lacing system, so that way it's the laces kind of hold the liner in and then the liner holds my foot in. So I'm gonna do that, and then, you know, let's kind of touch base on flex. You know, honestly, you know, skating ledges today where I wasn't using a ramp like into it and doing top sides, definitely noticed the skate was a little stiffer. I wouldn't say that it was as stiff as like the Echo Verve was out of the box, but definitely a little on the stiffer side. You know, using like a supportive liner, like the Intuition too, you know, that always can kind of add to some of the resistance as well. But you know, my problem is where I have like skinny ankles, I get heel lift, so I've really got to keep my foot locked down, otherwise I get hot spots and blisters. So you know, I'll probably do one more video tomorrow as long as it's not raining, you know, for this video, and see how that dual lacing combo works. And that should wrap up this series of videos. And if that doesn't pan out, then I may, you know, try some other liners in this and, you know, just continue the experiment. So wrapped up day 2, on to day 3. All right, so I'm back for day 3. One thing I noticed with the Intuition liners is I still had the 4mm basically insole still inside the liner. So what I did is I took that out, swapped it out with my 3mm King Foam insole under the liner, and then as I mentioned yesterday, I swapped out the laces so it only comes up to the top eyelet, and then threw in the gold Intuition laces. So we'll see if that makes any difference today. But today's goal is to skate some quarter pipe and coping. And the reason for that is because the last couple sessions I skated rails, I skated ledges, I skated transition. So I just want to get a feel for how these roll on quarter pipes. All right, so wrapped up day 3, so let's kind of talk about how today went. So I noticed that as my session went on, the laces in the Intuition liners basically loosened up and I had to keep retightening them. I remember why I don't skate the Intuition liners, and they're in dire need of like a waxed lace. But I would say that my experience today with using the 2 laces was not an improvement over yesterday. So with that being said, I'll probably go back to, 1 single lace for everything. I don't know what it is, but my big toes, like the ends of them are bruised, and it doesn't feel like they're hitting the end of the skate, but something is happening like when I'm skating these where that's going on. I remember that the IQONs come with these like little foam caps, toe caps. I may try those out next time. So, we'll see where that goes. As far as how these were today on coping, honestly, it was really good. Honestly, the flex with these two remind me a lot of the IQON AG15s, which I enjoyed. I thought they were very comparable for fit and flex and the way they slide. So, I think that's good. I am in a little bit of a dilemma though, because I've enjoyed skating these skates big wheel, but where I'm having problems with my factions, it's kind of leaving me in this, what do I do? Because, I enjoy big wheel skating, I enjoy aggressive, and I really don't want to alternate back and forth. So, I'm going to think about that a little bit. Another thing I wanted to mention too is when I set these up, I found that it was a really easy process. I basically took off that front receiver mount for the 165, and I left the receivers on the inside because they didn't seem like they were moving around and rattling, like especially when I put my weight on it. So all I had to do was mount the sole plate, mount the frame, and it was super quick. But I don't want to have to construct and deconstruct these every time I want to skate them. I want them for one setup or the other, but I'm trying both just to see what, the full experience with these are. I did want to comment on the shock absorber. So like I said, I threw the King Foam 3mm in there, and I thought that really helped a lot with kind of improving some shock absorption. Just need to figure out the toe issue. So I'm going to think a little bit about what I want to do there. All right, well, that wraps up 3 sessions in the IQON ACT skates, skating them aggressive. So if you got any comments, got any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll do my best to get back to you. One thing that I forgot to mention as well is I am a 27.5 Mondo 275. And this is I believe it's the 42-43 skate. yeah, 42, 43 IQON skate. So my foot should fall in the middle of the size range, which is why I was a little surprised that, you know, I'm having some toe pain just in the end of the skate. Anyway, we'll catch you next time.